Hello Moana Exile, my name is Sparkwind, and this is going to be my Herald of Thunder Autobomber League Start build guide. So I am an avid Herald of Thunder player. I first tried this build out in Arch Nemesis League and I instantly fell in love with it. I have been league starting it every single league since then. I am not the inventor of this build by any stretch. This is just sort of a standard implementation of what most people are doing with Herald of Thunder these days. This build is for semi-experienced trade league players. If this is the first build you've ever played, this is not a good place to start, and if you want to play in solo self-found, you're going to have a hard time sourcing some of the uniques that this build needs to get going. So first off, I want to cover some frequently asked questions that I think need to be addressed. Then I'm going to delve into the build mechanics a little bit, and then after that we'll pull up the PoBs, kind of explain what's going on there. Afterwards, hopefully I'll get some gameplay in. I am not a professional streamer. This is the first guide I've ever done. My computer exploded earlier when I tried to stream some actual gameplay, but we're going to try our best and see what happens there. So first off, what do I mean by a league starter? Herald of Thunder is not something you can play from level 1. Realistically, I tend to transition into it in yellow maps, kind of end of day 2, early day 3. Nothing you need for this build is that expensive, but you do need to buy a lot of items to get it going, and you need the money to get to that point, buy the respec orbs, all that, and transition. Second of all, this is an Autobomber. Not everyone necessarily knows what an Autobomber is. An Autobomber is an archetype of build where you can run around the place and not cast spells. That's the main draw of this. Herald of Thunder specifically is very cheap and very fast. It can explode the whole screen, and it has really good boss DPS for a clear speed build. On top of that, it is the 2 strongest defensive layers in the game. Those would be the ability to deal damage without moving so nothing can hit you, and instant offense. Things will often die before you even can react to them and know that they're there. However, there are some downsides to this build. As I said before, there's a lot of trading. If you hate trading, this is not a good build for you. You're going to have to buy 13 things to get the build going, even more later on. If you don't like that, don't like whispering people, this is not a great place to be. Second of all, if you hate dying, this is not a good build. I'm going to pull up my character here. I think I've got my slash deaths. I have died 1,343 times. That's getting to level 96 and doing 40 out of 40 challenges, but that is a lot of death. You need to be warned, if you don't like dying, this is not a build for you. Next, carries. This build can do the Eater and Exarch pretty easily, but it struggles a bit early on with Maven and Uber Elder. You're probably going to need to buy carries for those. It can do all non-Uber content pretty easily once you're geared out, with your endgame setups, but early on, that's not really achievable, and you're going to want to buy those carries. Ascendancy. If you look on PoE Ninja, you'll see a lot of people using Elementalist. This build is for the Assassin variant. Now, Elementalist is really, really great. It has more AoE, and it has more defense than the Assassin does. The Assassin goes faster and deals more damage. Both are really great choices, though. If you want to follow this guide and go Elementalist, you can. You just path from Elementalist instead of pathing from Assassin, and everything basically is the same. If you're looking, you might also notice some Pathfinders in, like, PoE Ninja or whatever. Those are a completely different build. They're using Voltaxic Rift to convert their lightning damage into poison and deal damage like that. That's very different than our kind of crit-based elemental setup here. Don't try to steal tech from them. It could go very wrong unless you know what you're doing. Bait builds are something that comes up a lot with other content creators, so I just want to mention first here. I've got my handy-dandy chart here of your typical league starter. Your typical league starter, this is something like Explosive Arrow or something like Seismic Trap, Cold Dot. They tend to be very cheap, and they tend to be very well-rounded. There exist Autobombers that are well-rounded, but they are very much not cheap. To get started with Ward Loop, you're looking at spending something like 50 Divines. That's a huge amount of currency. Can't league start it. Herald of Thunder, you can get going for 2 Divines, but it is not well-rounded. You will die a lot. You need to know what you're getting into with this sort of build. All right, with that out of the way, we have next, I wanted to talk about the pricing. So pricing with this build, I am assuming post day 2 prices, sort of. In the first 24 hours of the league, prices can be really crazy on a lot of items. Some of these items might not even exist in the first 12 hours of the league. So if you suddenly get to maps and think, oh my god, some of these items don't even exist yet, that'll change really quickly. Everything this build needs is really common and really cheap. Just chill, level up a bit, do some maps, and by day 2, day 3 at the worst, everything's going to drop in price and you will be good to go. So, leveling builds. There are a lot of really popular leveling builds out there. I know that Self-Cast Spark is really popular next league. I think Seismic Traps is going to be popular. Pyroclast Mines, Cold Dot, Frostblades, Toxic Rain. There are build creators out there for all of these that are really good at what they do. If any of those sound fun, you can league start with them. None of the gear is going to transfer over from anything, so play what seems fun to you. You're going to be doing it for a day or two. I personally like ArcMines because I don't like targeting anything, and that's what ArcMines is good at. With sort of a 6-link as your only thing you're going to buy and 2 gem-crafted wands or scepters, you can get to about 2 million DPS really easily, have really good evasion from Grace, and be spell suppress capped with 1 piece of gear. So this is what I personally do. It's very simple, very easy. Only note I would say here, looking at this, is if you don't like Minefield, you can go for Swift Assembly instead. Other than that, this is just really, really simple. There's not anything to explain. You just get the gems, follow the thing, and you're good to go. Moving on from that, we are going to move into the actual Herald of Thunder Autobomber build. And first, I want to talk about what the mechanics of Herald of Thunder are. So Herald of Thunder is an ability that you reserve mana with, and once you kill a shocked enemy, it starts to rain lightning bolts down on the enemies around you. That's how we're going to be dealing damage. Now, you need to kill a shocked enemy before Herald of Thunder starts going, so we need a ring called Storm Secret to get our combo started. Storm Secret allows your Herald of Thunder to start going once you shock an enemy, which is different than killing. You don't need to kill the shocked enemy, you just need to shock it. So that allows our combo to start so we can start dealing the damage to kill the enemy. Herald of Thunder is a single target ability. Each lightning bolt only hits 1 enemy, so we need some sort of clear speed. We achieve that through the Storm's Gift gloves and the Inpulsa's Broken Heart chest piece. The Storm's Gift gloves cause enemies you kill to be shocked and to shock enemies around them. Herald of Thunder can't shock by itself. So because this is applying shock to everything around us, the Impulse's Broken Heart chest piece can explode shocked enemies, which then count as shocked, which then spread their shocked. So it creates this whole cascade which blows up the whole screen, is really satisfying to play with. You really need these 3 items though, or Herald of Thunder just doesn't really function as a build. So I have a shopping list and my guide. I'm going to pull the PoB back up right now. This is our early on. This is assuming like a level 16 gem with a 4-link, very achievable early on gear. This is level 70. That's right when you're killing Katava. By the time you're transitioning into this, you're probably going to be a few levels ahead of this anyways, but this is just like absolute minimum gear that this build has to get going, and it's already got 300,000 DPS. That's more than enough to get through white maps, more than enough to get through yellow maps too. You're going to start struggling in red maps with that much DPS, but you're not going to be level 70 in red maps. So I have my shopping list here of gear you need to get started. The typical budget you're looking at is probably 2 to 3 div. I've done it all before on less than that, but just to be careful, that's what I'm going to say here. The first item you need is Impulsa's Broken Heart. That is your chest piece. It is not necessary you buy a 6-linked one. As I said here, this is assuming like a 4-link here. Just buy whatever's cheapest and link it yourself. 4 links really trivial to do. Next up is the Storm Secret and Storm's Gift. That's your ring and gloves. Those are also very cheap. The Storm's Gift gloves are hard to get really early on in the first 12 hours of the league because they come from Cortex content. Just wait. No other build uses them. They're unbelievably cheap. The market will be flooded with them by the first 24-48 hours. There'll be lots of them, and they'll be really easy to get. Storm's Gift ring's the same. It is extremely common. No one else uses it. There'll be a Chaos or 2. The Glorious Vanity Jewel is the first thing that we come across that might actually be expensive next league. There's no way to know this, but the Legions got nerfed, so it could be that there are fewer people running Legion, and that could mean there's less supply of this gem. This gem is really important to the build, though. It provides the Corrupted Soul keystone here. Corrupted Soul allows our damage to be split between Energy Shield and Life, and that we don't have a lot of Life or Energy Shield in the first place. This also gives us a boost of Energy Shield. So it's really hard to keep up with the damage from the Storm Secret Ring. This allows us to leech from both pools of health at the same time, which allows us to not kill ourselves. You could, if you are in a pinch, let's say this is unbelievably expensive next league, you could try grabbing all the recope nodes and see if that works. I think it probably would, but I've not tested it myself. So, do that if you need to. But I think this gem shouldn't be that expensive. It's just in the case that it is, look out for that. Next is the Calamitous Visions. That is the small cluster jewel here. That locates a node called Lone Messenger, and Lone Messenger disables your other auras. Other auras wouldn't affect Herald of Thunder anyways, and it doubles your Herald damage. So no other build really uses this. I think Herald of Agony could probably use it, but Herald of Agony is not a popular build. No one else is using this. It's very cheap. Next, we have the Annihilating Light. That's going to be our staff. Once again, don't worry about links. If you have enough elemental resistance, don't even worry about the rolls on it. This triples our damage. It's really important for this build. It's really nice to have. If you can't deal with the penalties there, you could use +1 scepters, but your damage is going to really suffer. You're going to have a third of the damage without this, so try to pick this up. Next are our cluster jewels. You can craft these yourselves or buy them. The medium heralds you definitely want to craft yourself. The other two you should just probably buy. The small armor cluster with enduring composure, you can alt spam to get it or just buy it as is. It is important because it gives you endurance charges. Almost all of our defense in this build comes from endurance charges and immortal call. Now, we are constantly hitting ourselves when we deal damage, so this will trigger constantly. You'll constantly be getting endurance charges. And then because of our cast 1 damage taken, because we're hitting ourselves, the cast 1 damage taken will typically trigger with the immortal call once we start hitting the enemy. So that means once we start hitting them, it's already active before they even start shooting us, so it actually works out pretty well defensively. It's our only defensive layer, but it's a pretty good one. It's not consistent, and that's one of the reasons you die a lot, but while it's up, it's really good, and you're surprisingly tanky. Next come our large clusters. That would be here and here. To start off, you can buy any size. You just need a single notable on each of them. Those are Doryani's Lesson, which allows us to leech life, and Storm Secret, or Storm Drinker, which allows us to leech Energy Shield. You need to have these two at minimum, any size. Eventually, you'll want more notables, but just to get started, that's looking at, these two, and you're good to go. Lastly are our medium herald clusters, so these here. To craft them, you need one that's level 68 plus. You throw it in the Harvest crafting bench. You hit it with a Reforge critical. That's very cheap to do. There's one critical tagged notable, and that is Self-Fulfilling Prophecy, and that's our best in slot notable. So every single time you're going to get a usable cluster jewel. Your second notable should probably be Empowered Envoy or Dark Messenger. Either of those are fine. If you get the one that applies exposure, you could use that too. Anything's fine. You don't even need to worry about the second notable to start off with, but they're extremely easy to roll and extremely cheap to do, so I recommend you do that yourself. Just buy the cheapest cluster jewels you can and do that. They can also be 5-socket. With medium clusters, 4 or 5, it doesn't really matter. And lastly, you're going to need to buy a lot of regret orbs. They start out at about 1 chaos each. As the first few days go past, they go down to about half a chaos, but you're gonna need to buy a lot of them. You need to factor that into your cost. Don't respec your build until you've got all this stuff, because it is really crappy if you were to buy all this stuff, or half of this stuff, and then realize you didn't have the budget for the rest of this and you had a brick character. So make sure you buy everything before swapping over. Some optional fun stuff that this build can use are Resistance Grand Spectrums and Vessel of Vinctar. Vessel of Vinctar is a flask that shocks everything around you. If you're too lazy to cast spells, which, you're playing an Autobomber, you're going to be lazy, that's really fun to have. It's not objectively good, but I really enjoy it. And second of all, our Resistance Grand Spectrums. Almost no one runs them. They can be a really cheap way to get a lot of resistance, which you need. Otherwise, you're looking at buying normal resistance jewels. The Resistance Grand Spectrums tend to just be cheaper and better, but if they're pricey, don't buy them. Just get normal resistance jewels. So that about sums up what early Herald of Thunder looks like. Your build will probably be better if you have like a 5-link or, have more passive points because you get a lot of damage from the passive tree. And transitioning at level 70 is probably not realistic. You're probably going to be level 75, 80, 85 before you're, in yellow maps and transitioning over. All right then, so that's the basics of the tree. We're going to then go into the items tab. Oh, and I just want to mention briefly that in configs, you've got power charges, endurance charges. You're always critting enemies. Exposure is lightning. There's nothing else crazy here in the configs, Guardian and Pinnacle, all that sort of stuff. So endgame gear here, we're going to switch over. This is what your tree will look like at level 90. Character kind of hits a wall at level 90 unless you've got really good gear, just because you're going to be dying a lot. You can get up to there. Getting over level 90 is kind of hard. I've gotten to level 96 without trying on an endgame character, so it's definitely doable to level up, but it's not trivial to do early on especially. And we will switch from our 4 link here to our 6 link. So this is with Awakened Gems. You'd probably be about 3 million DPS at your level 90 build, but this is about what to expect. So to transition as you level up, you're going to want to first get flasks. Let's talk about them. You want Surgeon's Flasks. Those are the ones that give you flask charges when you crit. You want them in every slot if possible. You are critting 8 times a second, so you're building up these charges really quickly. You can basically sustain flasks on bosses permanently, which is really nice to have. The other mods don't really matter that much. You're probably going to want to get Corrupted Blood immunity somewhere. I like getting out of my life flask because when I panic, I can just press it and you're good to go. Get it on a jewel, but those tend to be expensive. I like Diamond Flask for the extra crit, Silver Flask for the onslaught movement speed, and Quicksilver Flask for the movement speed. Any flasks work, though. If you want to use double defensive ones, that's fine. If you want to, so double armor, double evasion. If you want to use an Amethyst Flask for chaos resistance, I don't know how necessary chaos resistance is going to be next league, but that's a place you can get it. And you could use a gold flask if you want the increased item rarity. Any of these flasks are going to be fine. Just slot them in and you're good to go. Next up is the Stygian Vice. Getting a Stygian Vice with a Phasing Abyss Jewel is really important. One of the main ways your build will die is you'll be clearing packs like crazy. Everything around you is going to be exploding. You're not going to be paying attention, and you're going to run up to a pack that doesn't instantly explode and get stuck on it. Then they're going to melee attack you, and you're going to die. Phasing Abyss Jewels mean you're going to run through that pack, and they're going to blow up while you're running through them, and you won't die. So it's actually really nice defensively to have a Phasing Abyss Jewel, and putting in a Stygian Vice is probably the best place to put it. As you progress further, you're going to want to finish your cluster jewels. So that is this cluster down here, and you're going to want to get the right notables on them. So that means finishing off your medium clusters with actually good notables. As I said before, Empowering Envoy and Dark Messenger are the 2 you want. Maybe the Exposure one, if you feel like it, but only 1 copy of that. And then with your large clusters, you want to make sure that you always have at least Doryani's Lesson on 1 jewel and Storm Drinker on 1 jewel. After that, it doesn't really matter. Storm Drinker is our best in slot damage notable, so maybe grab it on every jewel if you can. I like Prismatic Heart. It gives us defenses, which we need a lot of. We don't have much resistance on this build. We need a ton of it, so this is a good place to get it. Getting the Exposure one is fine too. Some of them just offer generic damage. Those are great. But that's what your large clusters are going to look like. As a note, I have lightning large clusters here. You can do elemental large clusters too. If you see one on sale that's cheaper that has the notables you want, you'll lose like, I think 2 increased damage, which is absolutely nothing. So don't worry about if those are better. Grab them if you can. Next is the 6 link. You only need 1 6 link with this build. It can be either your chest or your staff. Impulses and Annihilating Light are very they're either Impulses is not very popular. Annihilating Light is very common. So sometimes you can find 6 links for cheaper than it would cost to 6 link it yourself. If so, grab one of them. You don't need a second 6 link because the second one's just going to be cast from damage taken. And as you get resistances, you can slot in your second Storm Secret. Storm Secret's going to give you 25% extra damage. That's really good. That's 25% more damage. But it's going to cause you to take a lot of extra damage, and you're losing a ring slot, which is giving you a lot of resistance. So only slot this in sort of later on once it's easy to do. After you get all that, your build's kind of done. That's kind of what this would look like here with the 3 to 5 million DPS. There are extra stuff you can do, though, to push your DPS even farther. That's Awakened Gems. Those are pretty cheap to buy for this build. You can anoint your amulet, and you can get Intuitive Leap. Those would be the first things I would do. So Intuitive Leap over here, normally you'd pass through here to get the power charge, and you'd skip this, skip this, skip this. Once you've got the free passive points, you can grab them, and that's better. Intuitive Leap is usually pretty expensive, though, so save it till later until you've got the cash. With Anoints, on this build, I think if I go from Endgame Gear to Advanced Endgame Gear, I like with this build anointed Whispers of Doom. That's if you're willing to cast a second curse. If you can get Curse on Hit on your gloves and then get Whispers of Doom, you can cast a Assassin's Mark or something like that. That can be really strong, but that is extra buttons to press. If you have not allocated Serpent Stance yet, you could do Serpent Stance instead. It's just extra damage. You could do Divine Judgment here. That's just a lot of extra damage. Or if you want to get Frenzy charges down here, that's a lot of extra damage for mapping. So really, there are a lot of anoint choices. You could do something defensive, but just anoint whatever you feel like. I've got Whispers of Doom here, but do what you want to do. Other things to get in the end game are Jewels with Life or Crit Multi. You can transition off your Grand Spectrum Jewels, get those. That'll increase your damage or survivability by a bit. With Herald of Thunder Reservation Enchanted Helms, that's not really necessary unless you are running Arctic Armor. I like running Arctic Armor as a reservation just because it gives you freeze immunity easily. You don't have to do that, but if you get the helm, that's something else you can slot into your build. Eventually, you can get a helmet with +1 power charge. You can craft that yourself. Hopefully later I'll do a guide on it. You can buy one. It's hard to find ones with the +1 power charge with the reservation enchant on them, so you probably want to craft it yourself. And lastly, once you don't need your amulet for resistance and health anymore, you can get a +1 amulet, a +2 amulet, or a +2 crit multi amulet, or craft them yourselves. Those can be pretty expensive, but they do provide a huge amount of damage to the build. And lastly, if you can find a Corrupted Impulses with plus gems, that's free damage. Then I'm going to go over some fun things you can do with the build. An Inspired Learning, that's the Headhunter gem. You would socket it in over here on this cluster here. You'd have to take this node too. It's not worth it. It's not worth the money. It's just a fun thing to do. Stealing mods from enemies is fun, but really they don't benefit this build tremendously. Curse on Hit gloves are next. You can use Curse on Hit gloves. Sometimes they will simply have the implicit. Sometimes you can corrupt them to get the implicit. They're usually pretty expensive, but it automates more of your build. And, on trash, you're probably not cursing anything anyway, so it's just boosting your damage. Those are cool to grab. Megalomaniacs are medium clustered jewels that can have 3 notables. Unless they have the 2 notables that your medium clusters would have anyways, they're probably not worth it. And the 3rd notable has to be better than whatever gem you're slotting in. So usually not worth it, but you might be able to find something cool that can do something neat. Tanu Ahi is a glove swap. So our gloves here are Storm's Gift. They only help us with clear. If you're doing pinnacle content, you could put in the Tanu Ahis. That's going to give you permanent adrenaline uptime on bosses. I don't like swapping, and it's not worth it to me, but if it's worth it to you, that's something you could do. And lastly are the tattoos. The tattoos for this build, if you look at our stats, we don't really have enough strength or dex. That's stuff you have to grab. We would if this stuff actually stayed allocated. I'll talk about that in a second. We've got a lot of intelligence. You can maybe need 150, so that's 10 to 15 nodes you can tattoo over. Lightning Res is one we saw for the blue nodes. Lightning Res is not something this build is tremendously in need for, but if you can prevent an affix, switch an affix out, it might be worth it for you. The other thing is increased lightning damage. Some forms of increased lightning damage don't actually work with Herald of Thunder, and I don't know for sure that it will work with Herald of Thunder. It's worded that it's generic increased lightning damage, which if we see we've got awakened added lightning damage here, that is something that works with it, so hopefully it will. It's 7 per notable, or 7 per node, and that's about 1% DPS increase per tattoo. So get 10 of them, that's 10% DPS increase. That could be pretty good. For the +1 skill gems one, we would use this down here, Ancestral Knowledge. You have to pass 3 nodes to it. +1 skill gems for us is about 8% extra damage. For 3 nodes, that's not stellar, but the strength is useful, so maybe that is something that you would want. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. I didn't go over the skill gems, so we're going to do that quickly now here. Sorry, I should have done that earlier. You want a level 21 Herald of Thunder. If you can get it, you just ball them. The quality doesn't really matter for Herald of Thunder. It's just giving you increased lightning damage. I don't think that actually... No, it does affect you. So yeah, try to get a level 21. Awakened Elemental Focus and Awakened Added Lightning Damage are great. They give us extra gem levels. The other stuff is all kind of optional. Depending on the time in your build, different things might be better. They're all usually within about 5% of each other, but Awakened Lightning Pen is something else. Like, if it looks better for your build, pick it up and get rid of one of the other things. Your mileage will vary just based on how much crit you have, how much Lightning Pen you're dealing, all that sort of stuff. I think, broadly speaking, some people use Empower. I think it is not worth the money. You've got like a 1 or 2% DPS increase over Cruelty and you're spending like 6 or 7 Divines for it. It's not worth it, but you know, if you've got it, use it. Your staff, you're probably going to have a Cursed on Hit setup. This will just automatically go off as you're taking damage from your own damage. If you get Curse on Hit, you can switch this over to just a Shock on Hit setup. I use Flame Dash. You could use Leap Slam. You could use Frost Blink, I think is more popular these days, so you might want to try that out. The Arctic Armor is good for freeze immunity. Once you're on a 6 link, you don't have enough reservation without the reservation helm, so just if you can't run that, just don't use it until you get a reservation helm and everything will be fine. Portal Cast on Death is a meme, but this is one of the builds that really benefits from it, so that's there. We also want to use a Cast from Damage Taken Immortal Call setup, and that's where a lot of our defense is going to come from. I use Wave of Conviction, but if you're getting exposure from somewhere else, you could slot in a Purifying Flame instead. Divergent Purifying Flame gives 5% more damage to any build, so that's what we would use if you aren't using Wave of Conviction. Then we need to have a Stormbrand. Stormbrand doesn't need to be linked because we're prolific anyways. Stormbrand is just to shock enemies. You can set it down if you know you're going to spawn some enemies and your storm isn't going, like something like a Strombox. You can lay this down, and then it instantly shocks and starts your combo when the enemies spawn in. Lastly, Decoy Totem is something fun I had. This was my Sanctum character that I based this off of. I don't really ever cast it, but I had it in the build because you could use it to block the fireballs, and that can be useful for like Syriac Arc, stuff like that. If you're willing to press the buttons, it's kind of cool. And that's about it for the skill gems. So that's what the PoB looks like. Just as a reminder, you have all the different levels of, starter gear here to endgame Mage Blood gear if you actually got a Mage Blood. That's overkill for this build, but, I've got it all listed here in the PoB. The other thing I forgot was the Impossible Escape here. Impossible Escape Blood Magic is something you can replace your armor cluster with. You would allocate these 2 nodes down here. This gives you your endurance charges, and this is extra strength. That's better than the armor you get from the cluster jewel. That's just, if you've got cash to burn, that's a cool tech you can do at the end. So with all of that, I think I've covered everything I wanted to with this build guide. Sorry if it was a bit jumbled and out of order. I am not a professional build guide creator here. This is the first build guide I've ever done. I didn't cover crafting as in-depth as I could have. I'm planning on doing a crafting guide for this. And even if I don't, I have a Google Doc in the description, which I use to look at to know how to craft all the items that I want. Also, hopefully, I want to put out a League content guide because, all builds are better or worse at different kinds of League content. I will talk about, the ones that I think are the best with Herald of Thunder. Although it's viable for all non-Uber content, some stuff does go smoother than others. So, with all of that, I hope you can build your own Herald of Thunder Autobomber. I really think it's a really awesome build. I have a lot of fun with it. I want to kind of end with a map here just to show you what the gameplay's like. Hopefully this won't lag out. I've had a lot of trouble in the past. I've tried messing with my settings, so hopefully this will go well now. If my computer dies, that is what it is. So let's, fingers crossed and see what happens. So this is my level 96 Autobomber. I probably spent maybe 20, 30 top divs on this. It's got about 9 million DPS. As you can see, basically everything blows up and dies pretty quickly. This is what you can expect with high investment. That's the inspired learning going off there with the stealing the stuff from the enemies. And we just never stop moving. You just hold down left click the entire map. You can map it to spacebar and hold down spacebar the entire time if you don't like left clicking. I am not really paying attention to the map because I'm talking. I'm not a professional streamer, and it is hard for me to talk while playing video games. One thing to note, I'm not casting movement skills. I tried Leap Slam last league. It was not particularly good. I don't actually think it speeds you up, but that's something you could do. There are 3 bosses here which really slow you down damage-wise. These bosses especially are annoying because they make that little thing when they spawn after they die that's chasing me. But on single target bosses, you are a lot stronger. Let's see what dropped here. Gauntlets, let's pick them up and go into the Conqueror. So once again, you lay your Stormbrand down so it starts your shock going, because we've gone too long without shocking. And now we start killing the boss. And there you go. So that's what this build looks like at about 10 million DPS. I think I'm at 8.59 actually. So you can burn down Conquerors really easily. You can kill endgame bosses. Mapping's really smooth and easy. The only downside is sometimes you just blow up randomly and die. So hope you enjoyed this guide, and stay sane, Exile.